Pretty good day to be out in the water.
In Southeast Alaska, scientists are discovering encouraging news about humpback whales.
No question, we're constantly getting new whales showing up.
And seeing rare behavior.
I think it's probably going to come up right here.
Feet off their boats.
They're all jumping out. That's hilarious.
But more whales means more problems that are creating conflict in this serene island community.
These populations are expanding, and they're expanding fairly rapidly.
Just ahead, what the whales' behavior is telling scientists, the fight to protect them, and the push to learn as much as they can.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
I'm Emily Carlson in for Rhonda McBride. In Southeast Alaska, there's a big comeback happening. In September, most of the world's humpback whales were taken off the endangered species list. It's an exciting time for scientists, but the increased number of whales is causing them to behave differently, even creating conflict within the Southeast community they live in. We visited the Alaska Whale Foundation in Warm Springs Bay, where researchers are unlocking the reason for their resurgence.
In the picturesque and vast wilds of Southeast Alaska, you'll find a tiny vessel filled with an international squad of whale lovers.
Germans don't last here very long.
The Alaska Whale Foundation's director is Canadian.
Time's up. Let's go.
His minions are from Italy, Ireland, and Germany. The researchers want to be here so badly, they're working for free.
The water's flat calm, crystal clear skies. It's a pretty good day to be out in the water.
Maeve O'Connell was one of 3 interns chosen from a pool of nearly 200. That's because Chatham Strait is one of the premier places on the planet to watch humpbacks.
Are we going to the whale or not?
Today, these sometimes impatient scientists are tracking them by boat. They're easy to spot. Once endangered to the brink of extinction, the International Whaling Commission stopped humpback hunting in 1982. In the last 20 years, researchers believe their numbers here have quadrupled.
We don't really have a good grasp of how many whales are out here.
But they won't know for sure unless they count, which is what they're doing today.
Here is how we number the whales. So 1A was the first whale we saw.
Every 2 weeks, the scientists stop at 16 different points along the strait to see how many whales they not only see, but can take pictures of, which is challenging, considering they don't pose for the camera.
Absolutely not, no.
Margarita Wilson is busy trying to get a good shot of the whale's tail, called the fluke, when something extraordinary happens.
I think I see bubbles right out there. We go.
Something so rare, very few people have seen it. It's called bubble net feeding, a new behavior in Southeast Alaska.
If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd say it doesn't really happen that often at all.
Mouth gaping, the whale scoops up hundreds of pounds of herring with a tool it crafted itself.
So when you see that bubbles in a circle, what exactly does that behavior benefit the whale? What are those bubbles doing?
The bubbles are basically trapping the fish.
It tells the scientists the whale population isn't only increasing, the humpbacks are making decisions, even problem solving in a changing environment.
150 years ago, 200 years ago, when there were humpbacks here, there was probably a lot more herring, there was probably a lot more krill, a lot of things. Now the populations are returning to those pre-whaling numbers, but the marine ecosystems have changed fundamentally.
The whales are finding new ways to feed, but it could clash with humans.
There he is.
Oh my gosh.
At a nearby hatchery, a whale named PJ
Holy crap.
feasts on an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's an easy meal, scooping up baby salmon right as they are released into the wild. Last year, the salmon population that returned to the area was smaller than usual. And scientists aren't sure if it's because of the whales, but it could be. To figure it out, they move from their boats to their computers. Off the boardwalk in a research house in tiny Warm Springs Bay, this is where the real work begins.
So yeah, this is the tapes. So this box and this box has all been digitized.
Maeve is backing up 2 decades of humpback data. The whales gather when they hear the call. And like a sports team, each one has a position to play in their game of feeding.
If we can see the same fluke shots, we know the same guys, Melancholy, Trumpeter, Captain Hook.
The researchers name the whales, and they know that some of them have been here for decades.
You can see some stretches here.
It's Davide's job to see if any of the ones they caught on camera today have been here before.
This is our picture, and this is the picture of the catalog.
Painstakingly, he flips through more than 1,000 whales and tries to find a match using only his eyes.
You can work the whole day matching because you go crazy.
In the past 2 months, they've recorded hundreds of flukes and matched just 30.
It's frustrating because it would be really, really cool to match them just because it's a good feeling, and then you know, oh, this one was there at that point. But it's not surprising because the population is growing.
The global posse lives, works, and breathes in the same tiny space. On the water,
You got a big piece of spinach in your tooth.
I don't eat spinach.
their boss makes sure the 12-hour workdays are sprinkled with fun and that no one takes themselves too seriously. Because for this group of researchers, even a slight failure is agony.
More to the right, a little more to the right. Oh, look at that!
Which just goes to show that here in Southeast Alaska, studying humpback whales is a passionate and international affair.
The mammals are amazing. It was so fun being in Warm Springs Bay. So another big question scientists are trying to answer, how is climate change affecting humpbacks? Now here's what we know now. In Southeast, the water is warming and the whales are staying around longer than usual. Now normally they are all in Hawaii by December, but last year Andy and his team saw humpbacks near Warm Springs Bay in February and March. All right, still ahead from whales to bison. We've been tracking wood bison since they were relocated nearly 2 years ago. Up next, an update on the project. Darren Bruning from Fish and Game joins us to talk more about the bison comeback. Bringing back the bison. In the 1950s, people thought they were extinct until scientists stumbled upon a herd of 11 wood bison. In 2015, the state helped introduce them back into the wild. With help from the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, they took on one of the biggest wildlife management projects in Alaska's history. By barge, truck, and plane, releasing 130 wood bison back into their natural habitat. Now, the logistical challenges were great. Special containers were designed to build and hold the 1,000-pound animals. The females were flown by plane, the bulls trucked to Nenana, where they got on a barge and traveled the last few hundred miles by river. The 1,000-mile journey took 4 days in the heat during the Sockeye wildfires. They were released in Shagaluk a year and a half ago. Shagaluk is in western Alaska. The herd is the only one in the U.S. Now, wood bison were the most prominent animal in Alaska for 500,000 years. So how are they doing now? Alaska Fish and Game Regional Supervisor Darren Bruning joins me to talk about the herd now. So how are they doing? Are they measuring up to expectations?
Yeah, they most certainly are. In fact, they're exceeding expectations. The population is doing great. They've been exploring their new home and their new and future home. They've been improving in body condition and they are doing great.
So you're looking at some of the pictures of the baby wood bison that are born in the wild. We'll show you those. Explain the reason that this is such a big deal, those babies being born in the wild.
Yeah, the greatest sign of success is the fact that there's young born into the wild, and it's a sign that the bison are healthy and that they're in good condition, that they're adapting to their new home, and they're able to produce young.
There was quite a few deaths the first year, though, 25 wood bison, but there hasn't been very many in the past few months, if not at all. What makes you think that the difficult part is behind you?
Yeah, those mortalities were to be expected. They were typical of what to expect in a wild bison population. However, there also was some gleaning of the animals that were not as fit as they needed to be to live in the wild. So there was some adjustment in moving into the wild. And as they adapted to their new environment, including, finding nutritious food and dealing with the landscape, snow and water and ice, they now should have a better understanding of the world they live in, and those mortalities should be minimized from here on.
Yeah, they had it pretty cushy at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, and then going out into the wild, lots of challenges associated with getting them used to being in a situation with no people to fall back and take care of them.
That's correct. Even just daily exertions completely changed for them, where at the Wildlife Conservation Center, they received excellent care from the staff there, and so they didn't have much room to move around in, or the necessity to have to move very far. And so now in the wild, they have a expansive, immeasurable landscape to navigate and can move at will, and also just deal with the challenges and the obstacles on the landscape. And it's just a whole new set of exertions for them, and just getting their muscles back in shape.
So they've been out in the wild for about 1.5 years, but you guys still track them about every 2 weeks. They've got huge radio collars on. You track them by air. What are you seeing when you go out and look at them from above?
Yeah, the radio collars help us be very efficient with our time and resources to go be able to locate the bison, and we check on their general health status from the air to see where they are, what their movements are, and be able to map their distribution and the habitats that they're using. It helps us better understand what the bison need from the landscape and how they're using it.
And how far are they going?
On average, the bison that were released from the core area have moved in a radius of roughly 90 miles. There have been some individuals that have moved farther than that, some probably up to 150 miles away. But even with that, they're all returning back to the core suitable habitat that was identified as very high quality wood bison habitat.
You had 16 babies born in the wild this spring. What makes you think that you're going to have even more next spring?
Yeah, it's exciting. It's every year we're waiting to see the number of calves that'll be born, and it is exciting. That number should continue to increase as the bison are adjusting to their new life out in the wild. Their body condition is just increasing. They're finding the nutritional forage they need to increase their nutritional status. More energy can be devoted into bearing young as opposed to just surviving and adjusting to their life. So with that ability to invest more energy into bearing young, we expect just an increasing number of calves over time.
I know you worked very closely with the community of Shagaluk over this period of time and getting them involved and getting them excited about the project. Why is that so important?
Yeah, they're the hosts of this new wood bison population and have welcomed them back to their community, along with the communities of Grayling and Anvik and Holy Cross as well. And I would hope that the rest of Alaska and even the rest of the world will recognize the role that those communities played in restoring wood bison to the landscape, which is a benefit to all the people.
What does the future look like for that herd of wood bison? What are you hoping you see in the next couple years, over the next decade?
Yeah, our vision is a healthy, viable wood bison population. The habitat and the bison themselves will guide the path for their numbers and how many there will be, but just a healthy, viable population to where all Alaskans and the people of the world can enjoy their values for wood bison.
Well, I know that this first herd being in Alaska and the U.S. is a huge deal. A lot of Alaskans really excited about the wood bison. We've been following it for a couple years. Thanks for coming on, and we will continue to follow the wood bison herd.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Darren Bruning with Fish and Game. We continue this conversation with another voice. Up next, Mike Miller joins us to tell us why the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center has played an important role in the bison relocation. We'll also meet Dyrus and Lothario and hear about their important role at the center. Animals at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center are used as ambassadors to raise awareness about conservation, education, and care. Two new wolves recently joined the pack at the center. Dyrus and Lothario called Oregon home before they arrived in Alaska last month. Another conservation center outside of Portland donated the 2 male wolves. Dyrus is a white wolf and Lothario is a black phase gray wolf. The pair are being integrated with 2 existing female wolves, Deshka and Bree. Aside from a few typical run-ins, the integration has gone well. Dyrus is described as the confident, hotshot male wolf, but Deshka, one of the females, is stepping up to show Dyrus who's boss.
We knew they were going to scuff a little bit, but she kind of made sure he understood that this is her house and he's a welcomed guest, but he has to obey the rules.
Obey the rules is important. Many animals at the center are taken in, treated, rehabilitated, and then released. However, the wolves will not be returned to the wild. The pack will be used as animal ambassadors for educational purposes. Mike Miller from the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center is here. Thanks so much for joining us. Why was it important to have females join the pack to round out that pack?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Emily. And it is important to have a whole pack with both males and females, something that would be in the wild. You know, you're trying to duplicate that, not just for the visitor's sake, but also for the animal's sake. You know, it's a mental thing where they have to adjust mentally and feel content so they can be wolves and not be disturbed and enjoy their stay there.
Are you going to breed these animals together?
No, we're not going to breed the animals. You know, there's no reason to breed them, and we're not going to release wolves. Alaska has enough wolves out there with that into it. And I think that for them, they'll have a better disposition being neutered there. They won't be thinking about all the complications that come with breeding and attractiveness and fighting and things like that.
Wolves are really intelligent animals. There's a lot of work involved and a lot of risk on your part. So why take them in?
Well, there is a lot of risk. You know, they're a predator and a carnivore and all that. And I was hesitant for a lot of years to take on something of this magnitude. And plus, I live, you know, like 50 feet away with my wife and kids there. And you don't want them to get loose. You know, if a reindeer gets loose, it's not as much of a fear as a wolf. But we talked to the Wolf Center in Ely, Minnesota, and got some advice from them on how to socialize them, how to make it work. And I was concerned too with wild wolves in the Portage and the Placer Valley that, you know, they howl back and forth, and would that cause the wild wolves to come in and disturb our little Garden of Eden down there? It's been peaceful for a long time, and I don't want to look out at night with a flashlight and see all kinds of wild wolves looking back.
And wolves and bison don't mix. We're going to talk about the wood bison. We talked a little bit earlier, but the Conservation Center has played a huge role in getting them back into the wild. Why was it so important for you to be involved in the project?
Well, the project sort of naturally developed between the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. We had the ability to manage bison down there in a captive thing through the quarantine because the bison were imported from Canada. And the state of Alaska doesn't manage animals per individual. They do it per species, you know, hundreds of thousands of caribou and moose. So working together worked real good with the state of Alaska. They work off a budget, and we could go out to foundations and companies in the community that wanted to support the project, making it a better project with so much diverse support. And we did have a lot of support from the Alaskan community, and they're still real, even though the project's not ended, but the bison have released. We met our goal, but they're still real interested in the project, and we meet every once in a while and still talk about it.
Yeah, because besides the ones out in Shagaluk, if you want to see wood bison, you're the only place in the country that has them. They're also kind of animal ambassadors like the wolves. When people come and see the wood bison, what do you want them to take away?
Well, when they come to the Wildlife Center and see the bison, I want them to know about the release and how monumental that is. You know, it's America's greatest contribution to wildlife conservation of this century. I mean, those animals can procreate and develop into massive herds out there, you know, as long as they have the range and do what they should do naturally. But for us, I want them to come down and look at the wood bison that sort of, you said they were moved on a barge talking to Darren, they missed the boat. They stayed at the Wildlife Center, but they are having calves down there. But I want people to look at our bison and say, wow, these are what's going on out in the wild. And to see how magnificent they are. I mean, they're the biggest animal in North America, biggest animal in North or South America. You know, what the wood bison is to the Americas like what the elephant is to Africa. They're just super huge animals.
So what does the future look like? What would you like to see the wood bison population in Alaska look like?
I, of course, like for it to meet the opportunity. You know, there's a lot of areas out there that has good habitat. And you know, the state right now has some economic restrictions. And we're sort of settling in with the Anoka to see what's going on there and to feel the enjoyment of releasing those bison out there. But eventually the bison will spread out and go where they want to go. And before the state of Alaska even considers putting them in another place or another reintroduction, we'd have to get full support from all the native communities and the native corporations and the urban and rural people. You know, we talk to everybody, and just to make sure that this is what they want and this is where they want their animals to be.
So you were talking about earlier about how the bears kind of overshadow the wood bison. Everyone wants to see the bears when they come to the Conservation Center. We're going to talk about the bears a little bit because I know you have a new bear named Humpback. How did he become orphaned and how did he end up at the Wildlife Conservation Center?
You're right. People are fascinated with bears, and I wish they were fascinated with bison like I am, but I can't change that mindset. And the bears are the big attraction down at the Wildlife Center, and new bears are cute and cuddly, and and that goes with their territory. You know, everybody likes bears, but everybody hates bears. Whenever you go hiking, you want to see one, but as soon as you see one, you go, let's get the heck out of here. You know, you don't want to see it, but you want to see it. And so the bears are the big attraction, and we have our bears in huge enclosures. You know, it's something that it's duplicated what they'd have in the wild. They don't even know they're in an enclosure because it's so big with lakes and hills and things like that. But it's a big responsibility to take bears because they live at least 35 years in captivity. Like parrots, they live forever. But this bear, Humpback, we got, he was found in Valdez. And I guess mother was in the dumpster and these dogs came up making a ruckus around the dumpster and she couldn't get out. And the cub went way up a tree and was just looking down at the whole thing. And then she finally made a break for it and the dogs chased her up over, I guess it was more than a hill, it was a mountain. And she didn't come back. And Fish and Game monitored her for a while and they thought, well, she's had her chance to come back and there's a big parade coming through in Labor Day. And so they said, can you take the cub in? And we were ready for another black bear cub. And so now we made that big commitment for 35 years.
35 years, but you can see Humpback, not yet with the other bears, but will make her way eventually with the 2 other black bears you have. Mike Miller with the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. Thanks so much for updating us on all the exciting things going on. And before we go, we want to acknowledge that today is the 45th anniversary of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. Our Frontiers program last week focused on the legacy of Senator Ted Stevens and how he was the driving force behind ANCSA. And there's an additional program airing today on GCI Channel 907. It's called ANCSA and the Agents of Change, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act after 45 years. You can find more information on both programs on the Frontiers section of our website under episode 85. Thanks for joining us.